it on the screen right now, it's going to be Leenock versus Trap from GSL Season 1 Group B. I thought this game was really cool from the Protoss perspective, so that's definitely where we're going to be examining it from. Yeah, so after this replay, I'm going to be asking you guys to post your own in Twitch chat, and I'll take about 3, and we'll go through those, and I'll kind of address you directly as far as what you could have done better in those games. I would prefer games in which you lose, so that I can point out and say, it's a lot easier to understand what you could have done better if you lost as opposed to if you won. So that's what I'm looking for there. But getting the game loaded up right now, we'll go ahead and jump in. So we can see Leenock and Trap here on the screen. Two very, very good players. Leenock, especially for ZVP, has a really interesting style. And that was mostly what I wanted to showcase here. As soon as this ever loads. Trap is known for being kind of overly standard and overly timing oriented. So Leenock is one of these players that typically will skip a lot of the sections of the game and just advance ahead into points where he's more comfortable. And that's kind of what we're going to see here. But let me turn on the sound and music. Probably want to hear that. This is a fairly long game as well. So either way, we're going to be focusing on this mostly from the Protoss perspective. And if you're a Zerg player, I guess this is your lucky day because every single one of these replays have involved a Zerg. So you can kind of see what they do and kind of mimic their stuff and kind of learn from their mistakes as well if they happen to lose a game. But yeah, so we will go ahead and get this game started here. Now the first thing you need to decide as Protoss is am I going to open Forge Expand or am I going to open with a Gateway Expand? And this pylon says the Trap's going to be open Forge Expand, so nothing too crazy there. And if he were to scout in time, he could actually figure out what Leenock is doing and just go Nexus first if he wanted to, rather than opening Forge first. But still, Trap's going to have to scout that out, and he's going in the wrong direction as we can see, so he won't know for quite a little while. One thing I should mention here is that if you're opening up with the Forge Expand, it's really not a bad idea once you put your Forge down to send out a second scout on a 4-player map. So if you have this scout coming up here and you don't see him, and you go down to put your Forge down, you could be like, oh, okay, well if he's opening like 6 pool or something like that, just something overly gimmicky and I'm not ready for it and I open like Nexus first, then I'm going to be dead. So that's not a good idea. And you can actually see Trap sending out the second scout. I did not know he was going to do that, but that's something that I do all the time in my games just to verify that you're not up against anything super crazy. And of course you can catch things like hatchery first if they do that, which is what we're seeing on a Leenock. So you can start to put on some cannon pressure, stuff like that if you open Forge first, but mostly it's for the safety's sake. So this probe realizes what's going on. He rallies the second probe up here to start harassing. Trap's going to start pressuring just a little bit with a cannon rush here, and it's up to Leenock to stop this. And most of the time you can actually just force drones to come down here and not put down any cannons. So there's this many drones off the line. I guess that's what, like 7? So that's a pretty big deal. It's actually 8 drones off the line. He just cancels it and just says, okay, whatever. I'll spend 25 minerals to make you lose that much mining time. So small little thing here, especially if you realize your cannon rush isn't going to work. You can even see Leenock being really smart and patrolling a drone in the spot where people would normally want to start their cannon rushes. So Leenock handling that well, but Trap also handling it well. Just by saying, this is a threat, and if you don't respect it, then you're going to lose a lot to it. Players like Classic are people that always also do a lot with cannon rushes and stuff like that, so that's a really big thing that you can do. And of course, if it doesn't work, you always have the option of just canceling it. And since he saw the hatchery first, this is another little adjustment that you can make. Since he saw the hatchery first, there's no reason to make a cannon that early, especially if you're going to make a unit to wall this off. Eventually, you'll probably want a cannon, but he can just skip that, get a faster Nexus, faster Gateway. Of course, the Nexus will already be right after the Forge, but faster Gateway more importantly. Faster second pylon, so you can get your probes up quicker. Faster gases, stuff like that. So small little things. You need to look for advantages that you can take in your own games when you see stuff like that. Now Trap is just going to be exploring out to try and figure out when the third hatchery is going to come up. The Zerglings are going to want to stop that, of course, and this is the next stage of scouting in this matchup, is once you've opened up with your Forge and you've got your base all secure and whatnot, you need to figure out, are they taking a third hatchery and are they mining gas? If they do take a third hatchery or if they start mining gas, then you're or rather if they are not mining gas and they take a third hatchery, which we can see here, then there's really no way you're going to be cheesed or whatever else. You don't need to be overly cautious back at home. But if they don't take a second hatchery, or rather a third hatchery, and they start mining gas, then that's going to start leaving you prone to things like all-ins, things like little timings to try and disrupt you and whatever. So he goes on and adds the cannon now. He realizes he's probably not going to get very much more scouting information, but based upon what he's seen so far, He's either playing middle of the road, just thinking I'm probably not going to get that scouting information, or he's just kind of, you know, going about his build like he normally would and just accepting that he's taking a small risk by starting to cut a little bit of corners, getting the faster Stargate, skipping a sentry, skipping Mothership Core, stuff like that. But he should be totally fine. Of course, we can see that, but he necessarily can't. He does start a sentry anyway, so this does look like a lot more middle-of-the-road type of play, rather than super greedy, super corner-cutting, stuff like that. He's just going to send the Zealot out now to try and figure out what's going on. And where's he walking to? I guess he's trying to figure out if there's a hidden base or something, but either way. So more gases start to get added on here for Trap. This is a decent time for extra gases, especially if you're going to be going for that really overly standard Phoenix into Colossus type of play. I'll have to see if the first unit comes out of Stargate. It could actually be an Oracle. He does have the gas for it. Nope, it's going to be a Phoenix. So just going to try and get that up there and start pressuring a little bit with Phoenix. So now he does verify that there's a third hatchery here. If there wasn't, then Phoenix would be a terrible choice. I think that's what he wanted to base that off of. If they're still just on 2 bases and going to be like all-inning you or doing something really weird, Phoenix is really not the greatest of choices. You probably want something like a Void Ray or maybe even an Oracle. But either way, Mothership Core coming out now once again, and we're going to have to see what his transition is, and here's the Robo now. So this is the most overly standard opener that you can use for this. So basically, excuse me. Basically, you're going to open up with Phoenix, you're going to pressure with those Phoenix just a little bit, try and kill drones, try and kill queens, get overlords, whatever you can, and in the meantime you're going to have a handful of sentries and you're going to start up Colossus while you secure your third base. This is what maybe 75 to 80% of pro PvZs are right nowadays, at least ones that don't involve the timing and are seeking a quicker third base. So this is really normal stuff, +1 on the way as well. Sentry just hanging out here on the wall, make sure it's on hold position, which we can see that it is. So he should be totally fine against attempted Ling run-bys and stuff like that. But the Phoenix are going to be here to scout. They're going to be here to kill stuff. He needs to figure out what Leenock is doing. We can see the lair just coming up now. This is the timing that you kind of want to orient yourself around. Lair tech typically comes up at about 9:30-ish. So you want to look out to see what type of tech it is, whether it's Hydras or Mutas or something like that. But you need to double check and be sure. So more Phoenix are starting to rally out here. It's just searching for overlords and stuff. Now the expansion is going to be coming down. About 9 minutes is decent. You can get a lot faster one with just say 1 Oracle, but that's a little more hard to run because you're going to be stuck on a lot of Stargate units, and sometimes you can die to Hydra timings and stuff like that. And you won't get as much information as with the Phoenix as well. So another sub-goal of the Phoenix is to stop a 4th base from coming up if you see any drones rallying over there. So this is just kind of based on how much APM you have to dump into this. If you have enough to keep your Phoenix active and to do everything you need to do back at home, and this is the reason that pros run this type of build, but you should be a little more careful in your own games. If you don't quite have the APM, you should focus on what's most important to know. What's most important to know is when the 4th hatchery goes down and what type of lair tech comes up. So there's really nothing coming up as far as lair tech right now, and Trap may be able to sense that. He's just killing drones for right now. The 4th hatchery is actually in a pretty hidden location, so pretty smart on Leenock just to realize that Trap's probably not going to see that for a little while. It might make him freak out just a little bit if he doesn't notice that there's a 4th hatchery in an unusual location. But let's start to add this up here for Trap. How many queens do you see just walking around? There obviously has to be a queen assigned to 1 hatchery pretty much all the time. So you can see there is 1 at each hatchery, but there are also these 4 queens walking around. And if you did see the Evo chambers, the 1-1, he's going to think, especially if he sees the infestation pit, he's going to think, okay, this is getting a little bit overly obvious right now in the sense that this is probably going to lead into Ultralisks, considering you wouldn't be walking around with this many queens most of the time, unless you're planning on using them later in the game. So you can kind of build scouting information by just making little assumptions here and there. And here come the infestors in the hive now. So yeah, this has to be something like Ultras, maybe even something even weirder like Broodlords, if Leenock wanted to get really cute and kind of vary that up a little bit. But yeah, we'll have to see what he wants to do. The observer over here is really smart too. It may seem like it's just doing nothing and sitting here. Sometimes you compare that with like an Oracle or a Void Ray to start clearing some creep. But what it's also doing is it's just re-examining the unit composition in a place where Leenock won't necessarily be scouting for it. These Phoenix are still being really good, and this is another part of this opener, is that if you can kill a lot of Phoenix here, you can actually see the hive morphing now, so Trap has to know exactly what's going on. It's got to be something hive tech, more than likely Ultras, but he needs to be careful because there's also a Spire coming up. This could be for Broodlords, and he needs to be able to prepare for that. Back at home, his adjustments are getting charge, which is pretty good against Ultralisk builds, or if you need to counterattack. He's getting Colossus range, which is part of his build anyway. He should have seen that that fifth hatchery go down. No, he didn't. Okay, he missed that. But either way, he's grabbing Blink +2. But he, again, needs to re-follow up and re-scout. You'd like to see him actually spend his sentry energy a little bit more on figuring out what's going on rather than expecting the Phoenix to get everything. Because he hasn't experienced any attacks by now. So by this stage of the game, about 13 minutes is when you're going to start seeing really big mid-game attacks, whether it's Hydras or something like that. But he knows that's not what's on the menu. Now there's the Ultralisk Cavern coming up, as well as Adrenal Glands. So the quicker he figures this out, the quicker he'll be able to adjust. Getting Warp Prism speed is a really good idea, though. So the whole theme behind this game is the fact that if the Zerg goes for Fast Hive, you need to be able to counterattack, and you need to be able to get in points of the map where he's not. So now his Phoenix fly in here, and he does see... I think he could actually see the Greater Spire morphing as well. So, no, he didn't. Okay, that's a big problem. So this could be any number of things. Again, the continued scouting is something he needs to stay on top of and figure out what's going on. For the meantime, he just assumes that it's going to be Ultralisks, and he's producing the Immortals right now to try and get on top of that. Another thing that you can expect is that his army is actually pretty small right now, while he's going straight for Hive Tech. So if you scout something like that, you will be open to small little pokes and timings here that they'll have a little bit of a harder time dealing with. So he's just going to poke up here and harass in the main at the same time. You can see a lot of Zealots are warped in. Going to pick off that Ultralisk Cavern, pretty big deal right there, and he of course sees the Greater Spire now. But getting two hatchery, or rather attacking in two places, you can see the Warp Prism speed starting to come into effect. Can actually outrun these Corruptors, which we can see now. So, did he actually finish that though? I don't know if he actually finished that Warp Prism speed. So the Warp Prism does eventually go down. He gets the Greater Spire and the Ultralisk Cavern. So this is one big thing with these quick Hive builds, is that you will have an opportunity to kind of multi-prong them. You always have the Mothership Core just in case things start to go wrong. Is he going to get two hatcheries and all the Hive Tech? This is just craziness out of Trap right now. Just being all over the map and getting everything he wants to. And yeah, he's going to get that. So Trap's in really great shape now. He needs to start figuring out, okay, am I going to force him to produce units he doesn't want to, like Lair Tech units? Or can I start pushing him really hard with the assumption that he's saving his money for Hive? So by this point, once you realize that you have this much damage done, you need to start being a little bit aggressive as Trap and figure out where Leenock's money is going. So he's going to start pushing out there. You can see Leenock desperately trying to rebuild his infrastructure. The Ultralisk Cavern is back up. Almost called an Ultralisk Den, but whatever. So a little bit of a hallucination trying to figure out what's going on here. A lot of Infestors out. I don't even think he's seen the Ultralisk yet, but I think Trap's start to figure this out because he saw Corruptors were on the map. They're more than likely not to kill Colossus because the Ultralists are already really good against Colossus anyway. Now Trap's starting to think it's something like Mutas, which very well could be. Adding on extra Stargates and the Fleet Beacon. But this is a good play because even if it's something like Broodlords and he just goes straight back into what he wanted to do before, he can just produce Tempests and get those out really quickly anyway. So the whole time, Trap's been basically in the dark as far as what Leenock is doing. Hit a nice little timing there to try and focus down some tech. But at the same time, he needs to continue to figure out what's going on. You can see these repeated scouts to try and figure out what's happening. He notices that the Hive is back up. He may have even seen the Ultralisk Cavern once again. He may have seen the Greater Spire morphing right now. So he needs to figure out what's going on. There's even a Mothership on the way for Trap right now. So you can see her morphing. That provides all sorts of utility. There's no reason not to get it once you get into these really crazy stages of the game, especially against Hive Tech. Especially once you have a lot of, say, like Void Rays or Templar or something like that. You can feed back their Overseers and really make life hard on them. But, I mean, you can always say, well, Fungal will reveal the units, but even still, you're forcing them to burn energy they might not necessarily want to. They won't get amazing Fungals if they can't see everything. So, I mean, there's a lot of utility to be had with this Mothership. But still, Trap continuing to hallucination scout to figure out what's going on here. I think Trap is actually playing a little bit too passively. I think by now he could have gotten out there and kind of been a little more adventurous with his recalls and been a little more aggressive, but at the same time, adding on Immortals, adding on Storm here, taking a fourth base, which he is starting to mine from right now. Another little harassment's going to try and diagnose what the unit composition is, and this is more Ultras than he's seen before, so he has to assume there's more Ultras being made. But he also knows the threat of switching into some type of other tech. He may have actually just now seen the Greater Spire. No, he hasn't seen that yet. So he's starting Tempest either way, just thinking that, alright, well, let's look at my unit composition. My unit composition is pretty good against Ultras, but if it comes down to that point and he switches into Broodlords and I get totally tricked, then what am I going to do about that? another little harassment here, and he has to cancel the hatchery. So Trap just all over him with these little counterattacks right now. And the other thing that should be mentioned is that these Zealots are worthless in a fight, especially against Hive Tech. They're never going to trade well against Ultras. They're never going to trade well against Broodlords. So you might as well just spend your extra minerals just trying to harass him and tax his economy a little bit. And of course, you will get more information on his unit composition as you get more and more harassment done. Leenock actually missing the extra fungal to catch that thing. But the other thing that it can do is it can move their army around and allow you for other opportunities to, say, recall back, pick off extra hatcheries and stuff like that. For the most part, though, Trap has limited Leenock to 3 bases worth of mining, and his main is going to mine out here pretty soon as well. Leenock is on an unusually low number of drones, 64, so this is pretty weird. But Trap, again, just trying to clear up some creep now, just trying to harass him a little bit more. Again, adding on more Stargates here, since eventually every single game is going to turn into your Stargate army. At least most of the time, it's the most stable way to do it. But either way. So Trap taking another base right now, and the push-outs are finally kind of starting for Leenock right now. He still has a lot of money hanging out, which he could use to try and trick Trap into the wrong unit composition. But even still, Trap's responding pretty well to it. Enough Tempest to deal with Broodlords. He has a fair number of Immortals right now. We can see if I can actually get the click on there. Yeah, 6 or 7 Immortals rather. You can basically almost one-shot Ultras with that. So Trap really doing well. You can see a lot of Broodlords have started to collect up here for him. So this Tempest investment was definitely good, even though he wasn't necessarily sure that that's what was going on. Now the Vipers have started, and this has been a fairly passive game outside of Trap's little harassments. Once again, a small little harassment here, but this is going to start to add up, especially against a super slow army here out of Trap. Rather out of Leenock. It's not like he's going to be able to get back and deal with that at the drop of a hat. So, and like we were talking about before, the Zealots are fairly expendable from Trap, so he can afford to throw those away pretty much willy-nilly as long as it keeps Leenock off his back and as long as it does some sort of damage. Observer speed on the way, something you don't usually see. But it looks like he actually lost his base to a little bit of a Ling run by. He needs to be a little bit more careful about that. Does he actually have a Dark Shrine? Is what I want to know. Yeah, he does. So what you can do is if you have these fringe bases over here, you want to eventually get a Dark Shrine up so you can take out these little pack of Lings and force them to have to bring Observers or other Overseers with them. But even still, the DT is still proving their usefulness in taking down a hatchery. So Trap has got Leenock back down to 3 bases and effectively 2 bases, not even that, because these are barely mining, and this isn't mining at all. So Trap basically just saying, alright, I know your army's slow, your army can't be everywhere, and I'll just sit back here and get like the ultimate unit composition while you kind of just sit back and do nothing useful with your army the entire game. Especially, here's another little harassment here. This time it's going to be shut down a lot more quickly. You can see the Corruptors do just focus it down really fast. Oracles supplementing the army is really smart too. This is going to allow extra vision for his Tempest. So the Tempests have a firing range of 15, but their sight range isn't quite that long. It's maybe, I think, 11 or 10 or something like that. The Overseer, or rather the Oracle, that's what that unit's called, or an Observer leading the way, or hallucinations or stuff like that are really useful in combination with your Tempest, so that's where Trap is going with this as well. And Leenock, he just hasn't been able to do anything with this army, and I don't know what his win condition is here. Trap has basically forced him down into a fairly low econ situation. Leenock has sat here with his army the entire time, and Trap has a decent enough army to counter that, assuming he gets a good fight. So eventually these armies are going to clash, but it's up to Trap to try and decide the best time to do that. He's going to be on 6 Stargates here in just a little bit, and his production is just going to be insanity, just in case he needs it against like a wild Mutalisk switch or something else that's really crazy. Finally, we're going to have a big fight here, or at least we should. And you can see the cloaking makes it so that Leenock has extra things to worry about, with his Overseers being in the front as well, to try and spot this army. So Trap going to be in a really good situation as far as vision goes, especially with the Oracles putting these down right now. So the Mothership Core does get pulled in, going to get killed right away, but even still, getting some decent storms on there, pushing away the army. So the Mothership not only forced the Viper to waste its energy, but it also forces the Corruptors to take a lot of damage, and now because of that, only because of the Mothership and because he couldn't see what was going on, now all of a sudden Trap has a pretty decent unit composition lead until these Corruptors start to get more healed up. So Trap being a little bit more aggressive here, going to start pushing across the map. Finally, now that he's comfortable with what Leenock is doing, you'd like to see him actually add on a little bit more Stargate units, maybe more Void Rays against the high Corruptor count, but either way, the Tempest starting to push up here, and he does have spotting on those, so he does just nail an Infestor. You can see the usefulness of the Tempest, and he just picks off a Viper, gonna grab a Corruptor, or maybe another Infestor. I think that was actually a Queen. Getting another Infestor, so you can see the spotting is a really big deal here. Finally, we're gonna have an engagement, and the huge fungal all over Trap's army. Trap's basically everything in one little spot. The Broodlord's in the back, basically dealing a lot of damage here, but the Archon's getting on top of them. Stalkers do have Blink. Tempests aren't focusing like they should be, and Trap is going to lose this fight eventually, because he just doesn't have enough to push these Broodlords down, at least with the Spines reinforcing right behind it. So Trap, I guess, kind of got a decent trade there. He does have a lot working for him in the sense that he was taking down these bases throughout the entire time, but either way, now Trap is starting to realize, okay, you lost a lot of supply there, you probably have a pretty decent bank. Now I need to put out some Phoenix in hopes that maybe I can catch you switching into Mulos right now. He actually doesn't have these extra 2 Stargates hotkeys, which is kind of a shame, but either way, Pathogen Gland's finally on the way now. I guess Leenock forgot that quite a while ago. But more Broodlords on the way here, and again, Trap needs to figure out what's going on. A little bit of a Ling run by here. He does miss the Warpin, so that's kind of a problem, but I guess Leenock just abandons it and says never mind. The Phoenix coming out here should be able to figure out what's going on fairly soon. And if he sees more Broodlords being morphed especially, that's going to tell him that Leenock is sticking on this Broodlord composition. This is what's really hard to deal with in PvZ right now, is trying to figure out where the tech is going in this later stage of the game. Now he realizes what's going on, starts to add on Void Rays. Again, he needs to hotkey his other Stargates. I don't even think he remembered that he built those, but you need to try and figure out what your opponent is switching to, because the answers to Ultralisks and the answers to Broodlords and the answers to Swarm Hosts and everything like that is all different. So you need to figure out what the best thing is for you to produce off of your buildings that you have by that stage in the game. So the constant scouting and rescouting is going to do a lot here. But Leenock's army is getting pretty crazy, considering that Trap acts much anti-air right now. Only 4 Void Rays, a handful of Stalkers here, and paired with the Fungals, this is looking a little bit like Wings of Liberty. Won't do very much against this army. What is Trap doing with the second half of his army over here? I don't think those are supposed to be there. And yeah, I think he realizes that. Now starting to bleed off some probes, realizing that this is such a deep part of the game. I don't really need this much income. I'd rather have a bigger army. Adding on Colossus here is a mistake, though. I think what Trap is expecting is that with all this static defense is that there's going to be some Swarm Hosts and stuff starting to rally up. And that's what he's expecting. But again, if he was able to get in here and scout and figure out what was going on, he would know that Swarm Hosts are not on the menu right now. So the biggest thing for Trap, though, is that he has limited Leenock to very few bases. He just now mined out his 3rd base. The natural is basically not mining. The main is basically not mining. So Leenock's on 1 base right now. And it's going to be up to Trap to try and stop this army. Or he could eventually just run around the army for long enough that he can entirely switch his unit composition into something that's going to be useful. But this is a pretty scary army, considering what Trap has on the field, which is just a bunch of little groups of units here and there. You can see they're just kind of scattered everywhere. But I guess Trap is just going to play this out the way he probably should, which is realizing that Leenock doesn't have another base, so I can base trade, and I can afford to take Nexuses completely across the map, because it's going to take him forever to get there. So I guess let the base trading begin, as Trap starts to push into the back of Leenock's base here. Seeing that there's no mining here, he's just going to start killing off buildings and kind of put him into an elimination race. It's going to take forever for Leenock to get his army back here to report to this, and Trap knows this. He loses this army, it's like, well, what's the big deal? I have a huge bank. I'm more than happy to lose this section of my army if Leenock has to recall all of his army back home. And again, you can see him taking Nexuses on complete opposite sides of the map, so there's another Nexus right here. It's totally away from his army. He could even move another Nexus up to here to force Leenock have to cross the entire map with his extremely slow army. And Trap can just continue to pick him apart here. You can see the Immortals are doing a lot of damage. They did kill most of these Spines, so the ground army is fairly unimpeded if he's able to get up there. But adding on Void Rays is Trap now, so he's realizing, alright, well, my composition isn't right to fight this, and since you're desperate right now and you have basically no economy, I have a lot of time to switch up my composition and start to just bother you in ways that you weren't expecting. Phoenix is trying to be useful in any way they possibly can. Gonna see the massive drone transfer here, and this is exactly what Trap wants. He wants to limit Leenock to basically no mining, which he's done so far, so he can switch his unit composition. The Phoenix starting to rally in here, just gonna kill workers at the other base of Leenock right now. There's still a small group of units that could be killing Overlords and stuff right now for Trap. But either way, Leenock, like I said, his army's just so stupidly slow. And Trap has so much time to prepare for things like this by scouting it out, whether it's with the Stalkers or with Phoenix or whatever, it's going to take Leenock an eternity to get across the map and kill all of his bases. So just continuing to trade is Trap here. He realizes that the Phoenix are probably the least important units right now, so he can start afford to throw those away. And Leenock's even just ignoring these units, knowing that Trap wants to switch his unit composition. But still, Leenock basically back down to 1 base's worth of mining. And like I said, Trap doesn't care about these units. He needs to switch into something that's better. In the meantime, Leenock going to be knocking down extra bases over here, but still Trap is in a great spot because he has Leenock on basically no mining. Leenock's eventually going to mine out of this base. And after that, what does he do? He can't be everywhere on the map to deal with these little squads of units, and he can't afford to section his army off because it's just too vulnerable when it's split up like that. So still, I guess just forcing the base trade is Trap here. And he's just continuing to refine his unit composition here. He does now have a Mothership, a bunch of Void Rays on the field, 4 Colossus right now. Even the Immortals are actually fairly unnecessary right now. I wouldn't even mind to see him peel those off and maybe try to kill this hatchery, since they're really not going to get any utility in this fight right now. But still, Trap doing exactly what you're supposed to in a situation where he has an army that's so scary that I'm probably not going to be able to beat it with the composition that I have, but it's so slow that I can be everywhere that he's not. And Leenock, there's really no right decision here for Leenock. I mean, he can't just straight on attack into Trap's base because Trap's going to keep rebuilding everywhere all over the map, and Trap has utilizations like Recall. There's a lot of Templar in there. If all of his Festers get fed back, then it's game over. So there's really no answer right now for Leenock that's going to help him really win this game. So Trap has kind of put him into a no-win situation. Now starting to put Tempest out here so he can start sniping Broodlords. Maybe even just snipe Corruptors until they're all dead, and then there won't be a Spire for him to rebuild. So, yeah, Trap's in a really great situation right now, despite what it seems. And again, you can see Leenock's base bank is pretty high, but with no buildings back at home, he'll have to reinvest money into rebuilding that. And Trap's just going to say, alright, there's another base gone, that's okay. I'm still mining, I still have other bases over here that I can move to if I need to. Eventually I'm going to have the right composition to kill you, or you're going to get eliminated. So Trap just continuing that race once again. Ultralisk Cavern now coming right back up here, but Trap has the right units to respond to that, so that's not a big deal. And Leenock's last base is going to be under siege here in just a second. There are some units still over here. Again, the same squad of units has killed a lot. Sarkon has 56 kills, lol. Really just taking down pretty much everything, but I guess with this replay what I wanted to show off is that there's really no other way that Trap could play this out. He has to start base trading, and finally these Immortals are being split off. He has to start base trading because he knows he can never stop this army out of Leenock. And while he does that, he can take a base here. Like we were talking about before, he now has a base to the top left. If he forces an elimination race, there's no way Leenock is ever going to win that because his army is so slow. So Trap now just starting to basically get Leenock down to no mining, which is going to completely hinder his ability to do anything. So Leenock has to bring his army back, and now Trap has a decent enough army where he can start to pick this apart just a little bit, even just grabbing a queen here and there. Every unit counts when they're down to this low econ situation. 4 Ultras on the way as well, but there's so many Void Rays out right now that it almost ceases to matter. So Leenock realizes this and he says, oh, okay, well I guess I have to protect this base. But at the same time, Trap could do a lot of things. He could cart around his Templar in this Warp Prism and start feeding back Infestors. Feeding back. I don't even know if that's a word, but look at the amount of damage that Trap has done to Leenock's base, only with this tiny amount of units, while Leenock has had to be out on the map and do something. So like I said, there's just no right answer for Leenock right now. And if he can just land storms on these Corruptors, if the Corruptors die, there's not a whole lot that Leenock can do about this. There's a pretty big fungal here, but at the same time, Trap still has money that he can use to rebuild. And he still has an income, more importantly. So the Tempest getting some decent shots on these Void Rays, or rather on the Broodlords, and that's the use of the Mothership. You can just recall if you ever get into a bad fight. So he just recalls out of there. And the elimination, okay, that was it. I totally missed it, but Leenock ran out of buildings, so he's dead. I guess perfectly played out there by Trap, realizing that the only way Leenock can win, and this is funny that we don't get vision of that because the Mothership is over it, but realizing that Leenock can run out of buildings if he can't deal with winning the base trade scenario. So I guess the whole motto there was that if you get into that type of situation to a point where you really can't stop his army, you just take bases across different sides of the map, you harass with little groups of units like Trap did right there, and you put him into a situation where if he attacks you, then you win the base trade. If he tries to engage your army, you just recall, You just continue to put them in no-win situations over and over. So this is the point of the show where I ask for your